Welcome to Healing Tales. I'm Dr. Ruth Roberts, here to help you become the best pet parent you can be, with simple, natural care that works for real life, real budgets, and real pets. Hello, I am Dr. Ruth Roberts, and welcome to another episode of Healing Tales. And today, we're going to talk about unmasking the roots. Dr. Marlene Siegel is here with us. She's going to talk about the true causes of dis-ease in pets. Dr. Marlene, welcome. You are an amazing force of nature in the integrative pet world.
Thank you, Dr. Ruth. It's such an honor to be with you. I love doing stuff with you.
That's so awesome. So we've been down, we sort of separately came to the same sort of route in looking at integrative veterinary medicine. So that's a word that's starting to kind of pick up, but maybe talk a little bit about what integrative veterinary medicine means to you.
I'm going to even back up one step further than that, because when we first started, it was holistic medicine or alternative medicine. And it had this weird woo-woo connotation. Like nobody really knew what that was. It just sounded out there. But when I actually looked up the definition of holistic, it simply means it's the whole body, mind, and spirit. So that made a lot of sense. And then this word integrative came in, which I loved because to me, it meant that we were taking the best of the old Eastern arts, the holistic world, and blending that with the allopathic Western modern medicine. That made a lot of sense to me. The problem I then had was seeing a lot of veterinarians and health practitioners on the human side using that word, but still using it in an allopathic manner, which what I mean by that is instead of having a symptom, name it, blame it, and then having a pharmaceutical to fix it, never going to the root cause, they were coming out with an acupuncture point, an herb, an essential oil, but something that was still doing symptom suppression and still not addressing the root cause. So I kind of stepped away from that integrative title a little bit. And I said, what do I really do? And what I do is actually bioregulatory medicine. It has nothing to do with the government. What it means is that it is identifying the biological pathways, the business of what happens inside the body, identifying what it takes for those systems to work, and then what are we doing that's messing it up, and how do we get it back online? And the three things that actually affect, there's four. Number one are deficiencies, and these are deficiencies of essential nutrients. And these essential nutrients, vitamins, and minerals, the fatty acids, the proteins, the aminos, these actually run our metabolic pathways. So they're not just fluffy, nice things to have around. It's not your Flintstone vitamin that we had to take when we were kids. This is like the real deal. This is what make our body work. And then some people say to me, well, if that's the case and we're so deficient, how come we're still here? And that's because we were able to survive under less than ideal circumstances. We're biologically built to do that so that when the season comes around and your resources are back, then you go back to thriving. So number one are deficiencies. Number two are toxicities. There's over 100,000 toxins, synthetic toxins, that have been developed and released into our food and our water, our animal husbandry, just since the end of World War II, which was 1942. And that combination of deficiency and toxicity leads to mitochondrial dysfunction. Now, the powerhouses that not only make energy for our body, but also help to regulate what gene expression, because they communicate with the microbiome and they say, oh, look, our environment is really toxic. So we need to have a different gene expression to handle this toxic world. Or look, we're in paradise. And so we can have a different gene expression that allows you to flourish in that environment. So those are the big ones: deficiency, toxicity, mitochondrial dysfunction. And there's always trapped emotions that are associated with all dis-ease. So that's your medicine right there, guys. Now you understand what does it take to diagnose something is deficiency, toxicity, mitochondrial dysfunction, and what are your trapped emotions. How's that for easy?
Super, super easy. So, and there you are. So there's your root causes of everything. And I think I love that you were talking about trapped emotions. And so I talk a lot about, pets mirroring our emotions. So is it our trapped emotions or the pet's trapped emotions or combination that's the root?
At the end of the day, it's ours. They're showing us something that we need to learn, to do, to fix, to heal. I don't like to call it a lesson because it sounds like, when you're being given a lesson, you're being punished. No, it's about bringing our awareness to something that we have the ability to perceive differently and shift the energy of it. And we're all just energy. We're light beings that are energetic. And I think that when we see these events come up and there's a strong emotion associated with it, I equate that to my computer program. When my computer's full, happens a lot, and it says, you need to free up some storage space. So what do you have to do? You can't just yell at your computer from across the room and say, delete stuff. No, you have to actually turn it on. You have to pull up the files and you have to choose what files you want to keep and what files you want to get rid of. And when you get rid of a file and you hit the delete button, your computer says, are you sure? Because it's going to go into an abyss that the computer doesn't know what's going to happen. Well, that happens in our subconscious mind. So we have all these programs that are running through, and these programs helped us in some time space dimension. That's why they're there. But do we need them now? And when somebody can identify the emotion that they're having and see the pattern, because it's not the first time you've experienced it, you've done it many times, many places, many people, and you just keep doing it. And it's because you haven't realized that the program's coming up for you to have a different experience. Think about it differently, perceive it differently, work with an energy worker, an emotional release person to help release the attachments that you have to that emotion and experience. And then you have room to do something else. So that's all it is. You're clearing off space on the hard drive.
That is an incredibly simple way to explain it. And I think that, when we started talking about, pets are our mirrors and all of this, it made people feel guilty. And really, it's an opportunity for you to learn a different path. And your pet
Yeah.
is so happy to show it to you and for you to learn it.
Yeah. Let me address that comment because I think you're right. There's a lot of people that are still in that victim mentality and they want to do the blame, the shame, even if they're blaming and shaming themselves. And none of this earth school is here to make us feel guilty. Everything here is an intentional moment for us to be able to become conscious and aware. So it's not that we caused it, it's that they are volunteering. And that's your pets, it's your friends, it could be family, it could be nature. If you look at nature, all our answers actually exist there. So these are our opportunities to step back and go, who's in charge? It's me. So if I'm in charge, then I'm creating it. And I also have the choice to do something about it. So step number one is we just got to own what's happening in our world and then become aware of it, not to punish ourselves, but to go, I am so grateful that I can now see I had judgment in my life, or I had abandonment in my life, or I had anger, or whatever it was. And then when you get rid of it, you don't have to keep experiencing it. It's amazing.
Wow. You mean there is an end in sight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if there's an actual end. I think we're always elevating and elevating. And, that's what we're here for, is to keep rising and to keep creating that conscious edge of creation. We're part of that conscious edge. Are we contributing in a positive way, or are we contributing in a negative way? So it's all a choice.
That's it. And really, that's all any of this is about, is to improve our level of understanding and to decrease suffering as we go.
Yeah.
And that's the human condition. That's the animal condition. Our pets are much more in tune with that. So they're able to do this for themselves if we can extract ourselves and our stuff from their presence.
Yeah. The models are all in nature. I mean, look at honeybees. I raise bees as well. And to see how they have community is amazing. And they work together and they support each other and then they defend each other. And we could all do so much better to learn how to get along, not take more than what we need, not destroy our environment, not
Uh-oh.
be ego driven. A lot to be said.
Amen to that. So here we went, two highly trained veterinarians straight into the woo-woo and the emotional. But I say that jokingly, but I think that you're
It's
absolutely
true.
right. This is what's underneath all of this chronic disease is old stuff that keeps us in a pattern of suffering.
Absolutely.
And so awesome. Thank you for that. So let's talk into the actual sort of a little bit more medical stuff. And the first thing you talked about was deficiencies. And I think that is something that is super critical because we're so overfed and yet in many cases undernourished. And we've done the same thing to our pets.
Yeah. So, number one, we've destroyed the microbiome of Mother Earth, and our farming practices are egregious in how unsustainable they are. So, our farmers are supplying nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, the NPK as a soil replacement after they grow something. But there's so many other micronutrients that are now being depleted and they're not being restored because regenerative farming practices aren't being done. So when you start there, whatever's growing on that soil now is going to be deficient in nutrients. And I just did a master class on this, and it was 5 to 40% of the vegetables that we're eating grown on these farming conditions are nutrient depleted compared to 100 years ago. So almost half of the nutrient availability or more is gone from the food. Just right there.
Right on. Right on.
So whatever's eating that food is also going to be deficient. There was a university study that looked at a population of dogs being fed a kibble diet, highly processed food. 85% of those animals were vitamin D insufficient because vitamin D for an herbivore comes from synthesizing the sun. Vitamin D from a carnivore comes from their protein source. And you and I, as omnivores, we get it from both the sun and from our protein. But if you imagine that most processed foods are using the waste on these feedlots, these animals haven't been out in the sun and they're already going to be vitamin D deficient. So, of course, whatever's eating, that's going to be vitamin D deficient. Vitamin D is one of the two cofactors that run the entire innate immune system. That's the immune system within our bodies that was built to take care of our immunity without us having to intervene by thinking about it. But if you turn that whole system off, then it's not working. Now, how do you expect that animal to get better? We go to the vet, they see a symptom, they put them on an antibiotic, a steroid, an immune suppressant, a whatever, a prescription diet that's even processed and nutrient deficient. And the animal gets a little bit better and then relapses, and a little bit better and then it relapses. And we wonder, why is that? Well, nutrient deficiencies. I test every one of my patients for nutrient deficiencies, even at a year of age. Over 80% of these animals have multiple deficiencies in the actual deficient range, and a majority of them are below the mean. The mean is what they say is the average that the average population should be at. They're even below that. They may not be in the absolutely deficient category, but they're below what they need. And the balance of them is off. So
Right.
this is a huge problem, absolutely huge. And yet only a handful of holistic practitioners are even testing for this. It's not something that you can look at the animal and go, oh, you're calcium or selenium or vitamin D deficient. It doesn't show up that way. It's this insidious not doing well. The ADR, ain't doing right. So we
Right
have
on.
to test. Yeah, I say test, don't guess, right? Do you remember when we were little, we heard never assume anything. And when you break the word assume down, is it makes an ass out of you and
You and
me,
me. Right on.
right?
Right on.
So for our pet parents that are out there, find a veterinarian who will help you test for these deficiencies and toxicities so that you're actually working with something tangible. Now you know what you need to do differently.
Right on. And that's the thing that's so frustrating too. It's like there's 78,000 small animal veterinarians in the United States, roughly at this point. There's 1,500 members of the American Holistic Veterinary Medical Association, and that's just sort of a gauge. There's plenty of other holistic vets that maybe are not a member, but that's part of the frustration is that so many pet parents don't have access to holistic vets, much less a vet that's actually working at the nutritional level, because that certainly was not one of our strong points of education in veterinary school.
They gave us boxed dog food and cat food to feed to our pets rather than educate us on what is actually healthy. I just had to bring that up in the master class that I was doing, because people always ask me, well, why has my veterinarian never said this? Or why is my veterinarian so against a species appropriate or raw balanced diet? And it's because of lack of education. Like we really were
Right.
not taught biology. We really weren't. And that's why when I do bioregulatory medicine, I now, 40 years into practice, finally understand the surface of how these organs work. But,
Right.
for my first 25 years, really didn't understand it because we didn't really understand those biological pathways.
And that's the thing that's amazing. The pace of science and understanding how things work together has just exploded. Well, it's always exploding, but particularly in nutrition in the last 4 to 5 years, our level of understanding is much better. But I'd still say we're just scratching the surface on it.
That and detoxification.
Yes.
So, Dr. Ruth, when I'm
Critical.
lecturing, it's pretty funny because I don't want to put anybody in the spot and embarrass them, but I'll say, can you name me the 6 organs of detoxification? Not one was able to name all 6. They'll go, kidney, liver, sometimes they get colon, but they really don't know what these organs of detoxification were designed in the body to do. Well, if you don't know how they work, how are you going to support them?
Right.
Makes sense, right?
And the other thing, too, is just recognizing that our world has become so incredibly toxic that a detox is not something you do twice a year. It is a daily event
It's a
when
daily,
you're doing
yeah.
it well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so
So,
let's talk. Let's
so
talk
here
about that a little bit.
I
Yeah.
modified citrus pectin
Right
on an
on.
empty stomach so that I start lowering inflammation and binding my toxins. You got to walk the
Right
talk.
on. You got to do it because, and I mean, you are clearly walking the talk because you just said 40 years of practice. You've got 5 years of practice on me. You are full of vim and vigor and vitality. And so
Yes.
clearly you have figured out a few things.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm rounding 70.
Right on. Many of our colleagues at our age are not looking too good. And it's
That,
because they've
but
taken the
yes,
standard American
that and
road.
they're burned out. Like
Yeah.
I can't believe how many practitioners are just so unhappy with practice. And it's because they're dealing with failure after failure or frustration and they can't resolve the problem and they want to. So not one single veterinarian have I ever met that didn't have the heart and passion and love to do good. But if you don't know, you don't know, right? So
Right.
as they start to, if they don't just burn out and retire, if they start looking for other answers, then they start to come across you or me and then we can start educate. And I have programs for pet parents. I have programs for veterinarians because it is my goal to make sure that we really transform our industry.
Yeah. Because and I think you're exactly right. It's the fact that there's just not the tools available to the veterinarian so they can do a better job.
Yep.
And I think that what we're seeing today is that pet parents are like, holy smokes, I asked my vet a question and she blew up at me. And I
Mhm.
think that frustration is that they know it's not working, but they don't know what else to do. And so what
Yeah,
they do is say the party line harder. And that's not helping anybody.
not at all. And I want to bring up euthanasia because this is coming up to me more and more. We have a wonderful tool in the veterinary industry, which is the ability to end suffering with legal euthanization. That's where we put an animal to sleep with an injection, chemical that stops the heart and the breathing. And that's a wonderful thing for sure. However, it should not be used as an excuse because that veterinarian doesn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
And that's what breaks my heart. People that come up to me and they go, I wish I would have heard about you a day, a week, a month, a year earlier because I didn't have to make that decision. In fact, there's one of my cases I presented in my detox thing with you. where an owner brings their 15-year-old dog in. It had a plethora of problems. It was in seizures, active seizures. So we had to stop the seizures. When the seizures were finally under control, the dog still had the unable to walk, had nystagmus, a lot of neurologic signs. And I went out and I spoke with the owner and I said, hey, we got the seizures to stop, but she's not normal. I think there's a lot of underlying problems here. 15 years old. Do you want to continue or do you want to say goodbye? It's still their choice. And this woman looked me dead in the eyes and said, well, years ago, we had a dog that got sick. We went to our vet and the vet just said, there's nothing more we can do. You need to euthanize. And they just did. But for the following years, they never got over the guilt and the shame that they didn't at least try. They didn't question. They didn't seek other answers. They didn't get a second opinion. They just euthanized the dog. And so she said to me, I can't do that again. I want you to try. If it doesn't work, that's fine. But I need to know that we can try. And I sent that dog home the next morning, walking, normal, no neurologic signs. It had a brain tumor. It had heavy metal toxicity. It had severe pancreatitis. It had a plethora of problems. But she had 3 more weeks before the next seizure. And then they were able to make an educated decision without the guilt, because now we had definitive information back about what all the different problems were. And, at that point, it's fair to the animal to end the suffering. But when somebody tells you to do that just because they don't have any other choices, their toolkit is so limited that they can't offer anything else, and that's a problem for me. And when I say,
agree.
Let me finish one more thing. I'm sorry, Dr. Ruth, but I want people to understand that we're not trying to make animals live forever. None of us are going to be here forever. We all have an exit strategy. I'm talking about leaving before it's our time to leave, right? So there's always quality of life that we can offer, even if it's in that last few stages. The number one thing we want to achieve for ourselves, for our pets, for Mother Earth is quality of life.
Right on. And that is so critical, because one of the other things I'm hearing from so many people is their dog has weakness or paresis or paralysis in the back end. And the choices they are given at the emergency clinic are $10,000, $20,000 for an MRI and surgery or euthanasia. And there's nothing in between.
Yeah, well, that's right.
I mean, even in conventional medicine, there's something called conservative management. And for some reason, that's just gone completely out the window. And, and I have to agree with you. I mean, we need to help pet parents understand where their animals are. That's part of why I started the Holistic Pet Health Coach program, was because of a client, 15-year-old Westie, had a litany of woes, a litany of chronic health problems. She went into the internist. She'd been seeing once a month for the last 3 years. The internist said, Janet, there's just nothing else I can do for Rosie. And I think you really need to consider euthanasia. And Janet's like, what? What changed? And so she kept asking this person, and she's not giving her any other answers than it's just Rosie's time. So Janet pays her bill, has a copy of the lab work, walks out to the car, and looks at the lab work. Rosie's creatinine has gone up by 0.1, which is insignificant. And so, this is the deal. So if Janet had said, oh, okay, that's the end of Rosie. But what Janet did instead was find someone else to work with, use my support to help her support the vet for some other options. And Rosie lived another year. And that is absolutely criminal, what's happening in our profession when your 2 choices are 20 grand or euthanasia. And that's just so frustrating.
Yeah. We can go on and on these stories, but it's very significant. I think the take-home message that I want to reinforce with what you said is that you don't have to stop with just that opinion. I got to tell you a quick story. So we have a lady, she has a little tiny dog, and the dog can't pee. So she goes to the veterinarian, and correctly, the veterinarian diagnosed the dog with a bladder cancer. She had transitional cell carcinoma, and it was blocking her urethra, so she couldn't pee. And the veterinarian said, you need to put her to sleep. And the lady goes, I don't want to do that. So she goes to another veterinarian. The exact same thing happens. They tell her the same thing. They support the diagnosis. She goes to a referral center. And the referral center says to her, not only does she have bladder cancer, but she would be the most cruel and inhumane pet parent if she left with that dog and did not euthanize it. And then I was stop number 4. So she came in, she was not willing to euthanize. I have a very arduous toolkit. So we did the proper workup, confirmed the diagnosis, but I started doing therapies that were bringing down the inflammation. And by the next morning, 12 hours, I emptied the bladder with a needle. So the dog was comfortable. And then by the next morning, the dog is peeing on her own. A year later, she's still going through some therapies and our products, and the dog is still alive. Does she still have bladder cancer? Yes. But is she having quality of life? 100%.
And that's the critical thing. This is what is so frustrating. And I think this is where a lot of pet parents get stuck. Your client is remarkable for being persistent and not taking no for an answer.
Yeah.
And having you as a resource. I mean, that's the incredible things.
Yeah.
So, and it's amazing that we can do so much online. There are some things we can't. But in that situation, if there's a pet parent out there that's heard it's euthanasia or this, or just it's euthanasia, period, what are some suggestions you would make to them to start finding other resources in their area? Let's say they're in the middle of Bentonville, Arkansas.
So number 1, start with education. And I'm just going to plug my pet parent course because it gives them 3 hours of resources and proof of concept. So once you are armed with knowledge, now you can start even going and asking your veterinarian, hey, I want to run these labs. I've learned about them. The lab can send me a test kit and you can pull the blood or urine or hair, whatever it needs, and we can send it in. I offer that even on my consultations, even if I don't have a client-patient relationship, anything that falls within my course, I can do pet health. I can be their coach, right? Because it's falling within that mechanism. I'm not treating and diagnosing a specific disease, but I'm setting the body up for success, finding out what's going on in deficiencies and toxicities. I'm helping to reduce inflammation, heal the gut, put them on a species-appropriate diet, do the detoxification, everything that needs to happen to heal anyway. And then your last step would be, what are the fine-tuning things you do for that particular named disease? And then I would either work with their veterinarian as a consultant, or they come down to my office one time, put my hands on that animal that is now an established patient, and now I can take it further. But what I've done is I've set it up to where pet parents can do an awful lot at home. They're going to have to buy some equipment. So ozone is a big tool in my practice, but it is a very affordable and easily taught tool for pet parents. Easy peasy, hyperbaric oxygen, frequency therapy. There's so many things that we have that the pet parent can do at home. I'm not saying it's going to be the end all be all for a cancer patient. They're going to need to go above that, but they can still get the foundation done. And for most degenerative problems, osteoarthritis, skin diseases, allergies, obesity, those kind of things, oh my gosh, that's easy to fix.
Yeah, right on. And that's it. I mean, there is a lot of ways to find tools. And if you are in a situation right now as a pet parent, things are pretty easy peasy. This is actually the time to go do a course with Dr. Siegel. I've got courses. Dr. Judy's got courses. There's so much information available to you, even if you don't have a holistic vet in your area.
Yes.
So be proactive. Start learning now. Figure out what's going to work for your pet, what's not going to work for your pet. I think that is so, so critical.
I heard a term recently and I loved it. And it was that we are stewards. We are stewards of our body. We are stewards of our planet. We are the stewards of everything that lives on this planet, meaning that we have a responsibility to make good choices. And if what we're doing is causing more damage, then we need to be aware of that and stop doing it. Have a replacement for that. And that might be as simple as I'm going to buy different products for cleaning my home that don't have toxins in them. or I'm going to eat organic, or I'm going to grow some of my own food, or whatever that looks like. We can start somewhere and start making better choices that ultimately impact our health, our pets' health, our family's health, and planet Earth.
Amen to that. I mean, that is it. We are always at choice. And even if you are really tight financially, things are difficult, there are small changes that you can make. You can start with, if you can't afford organic produce, you can go to Environmental Working Group and find out what their Clean 15 is and the Dirty Dozen. And so they're going to tell you the 12 most contaminated fruits and vegetables and the 15 least contaminated. So that's a better choice. Not eating the Fritos is a better choice. Not feeding your cat the Fritos is a better choice. And so it's little tiny things. So we have so much power on earth, right? And that's what we want you to do is exercise your power, your choice, and be the good steward. That is what we are all supposed to do.
Yep. And it's easy. It's really not hard. We just have to think differently. And that's all choice. We go back to the beginning, kind of like the comedian where they tie it all back together again at the end. Yeah.
Here's the punchline, folks.
We might have to do stand-up health, stand-up comedy. But it's true. It's just like, who do we turn around? Oh, remember this? Okay, I don't know if you can see my hand, right? When you're pointing your finger at somebody and you're going to blame them, well, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. So let's not go out there and try to make it somebody else's problems. Own it. Own it and make a choice to be different.
Amen. Stepped out of victimhood and into empowerment. And when you do that for yourself, you're doing it for your pet. Because you're going to own the 3 seconds between when the veterinarian says to you, there's nothing you can do but euthanize this dog, between what your response would be, maybe bursting out into tears or something like that. Take those 3 seconds and say, thank you, doctor. I appreciate your opinion. I'll be going now.
Thank you. I love that.
And there are situations where really that is the right answer. And you will know in your heart that is the right answer. But if your heart is like, no, trust your heart.
And instead of leaving that veterinarian a 1-star review because you weren't happy with their answer, why don't you gift them with some education? Maybe give them the link to either my veterinary training course or something Dr. Ruth has or something Dr. Morgan has, so that they can at least be exposed. Maybe they won't make the step yet, but at least you've opened the door, you planted the seed, metaphorically speaking, and maybe down the road you've really done them a benefit by helping to open their mind.
Amen. And that's the other thing that's really hard, right, is to step from anger into compassion. Yes. And when you can step into compassion, then you can be a change maker.
Yeah.
So that's so critical. And how much better is that than just being angry at somebody because they told you this terrible thing?
Yeah.
And recognize instead that that's what their toolbox had. For your
just
pet.
A limitation. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right on. Well,
wow.
We danced around the moon today.
That was high level, but I think people need to see the big picture. So
I agree.
And I know that anytime we have a conversation, there's somebody out there that we're speaking to. And even if we only touch one person, I know we've touched many people, but even one person, we've done good in the world.
That is the truth. So, Dr. Marlene, this has been an absolute ball. All of the work you've done at Pasco Veterinary Center, creating lines of products of raw food, has all been in the effort to support pets and their pet parents so that they are better guides, they are better shepherds.
Yeah.
So where can our listeners find you and figure out how to access your resources?
Everything is at Dr., like doctor, the initials, drmarlenesiegel.com. Made it super easy. But I do want to mention that I have a raw food company, I have a supplement line. I didn't do that because I just thought the world needed one more. I did it because every company that I approached to do a clean, healthy line said, we can't do that. We don't think there's a market for people who want that higher end. And I said, well, I've got cancer patients. I can't afford for my patients to have another drop of toxin. So I have to have that clean of a line. And I have to know that the ingredients that are in that bottle or capsule actually are in that bottle or capsule. It took me 4 years to find a group of supplement companies that I could trust that had standards equal to or higher than my own. I finally found them, which was amazing. But, I searched the world and I found them an hour from where I live.
Amazing.
Isn't
Amazing.
that crazy? And they were there. So I want people to understand that things in the marketing world are not what they always look at. In that you read these labels, and if it says proprietary blend, really raise an eyebrow, because that you may not really know what's in that blend. If there's a lot of ingredients listed along that, you don't know that all those ingredients are actually in there. It could be any mixture of them. And what they do is they label it that way so that when they go to purchase ingredients, if something is really expensive, well, they may not buy that product and put more of something else in.
Right.
That's how they make their formulas, but they're not consistent.
Right. And that's a huge problem. And there's certain doses that we know work for certain molecules. And if you've got just a pinch in there, then you're wasting your money.
Yeah. Hey, I want to talk about one more thing. Do we have a
Sure.
couple minutes?
We
Okay.
do. We got time.
So let's talk about raw food, because when
Yeah.
I started my company, there were less than 5 companies doing raw food. And now there are gazillions. But what happens is these companies are making raw food that sounds appealing to us as the pet parent. So if you're paying meat prices, but you have a diet that's 20 to 30% vegetables, think about that. A, are you really providing what species appropriate that animal needs? B, are they able to break down all those vegetables? Which the answer is no. C, are the nutrients in those vegetables? Are they even organic, let alone have sufficient nutrient quality in them? So what I learned when I started going into the food industry was there has to be a better way, because the pet food companies make you put certain label requirements in there, but that doesn't mean they're bioavailable or that they're absorbable or that they even have the nutrient content in them, because it's not measured. So what I started to do was differentiate the macronutrients from the micronutrients. So a macronutrient is your meat, fat, bone, and organ meat. That's what makes the foundation of the diet. So when a carnivore in the wild would go out and hunt something because it was hungry and it killed a rabbit, a wildebeest, whatever it was going to kill, and they ate it, they ate the meat, fat, bone, and organ meat. But they also would tear through the intestines, and in the intestines was the grasses and things that the herbivore was eating, digested for you. It's a DIY system. So all of that vegetable material is now digested for the carnivore to get, along with the pre and probiotics from the intestinal tract of the herbivore. That's how nature modeled that. You don't see carnivores out there grazing in vegetable gardens. So now
Unless they're Bobby.
So now we're going to come back and go, okay, what would be a species appropriate diet? Not the diet that they can survive on, but they can thrive on. And that's how I, in my mind, was able to understand what nature modeled and how can we model that as close as possible in our modern world.
Right on. And I took a very different approach. So my training is in traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, and I took the cooked diet approach, which a lot of folks would disagree with. But what I've seen is that when we're using high quality animal proteins, And especially for these animals that have been sick for so long, I see them improve dramatically. We're presenting them with vegetables that are pre-digested and
Wow,
then
the key, they're pre-digested.
exactly that. And so that's it. The whole food is pre-digested. And
Yeah.
so for these animals that have been sick for so long, they're able to absorb the nutrient. We add in, I do use synthetic vitamins because I've seen, and actually most of them are food-based, but what I've seen is that that surplus along with the real food ingredients, the cofactors, increase the absorption and we see that animal come back to health. Now for cats, they are absolutely the species that should only be raw fed. But convincing some cats of that is an interesting trick.
Yeah, we got our ways. But you know what you're saying is that, I totally agree, that taking an animal off of a highly processed diet and getting them on even a cooked diet is going to be 1,000% better than where they were. And then keep moving towards as species appropriate as we can get. But we have to heal the gut. We have to improve digestion. We have to bring down inflammation. There's a lot of factors. Most of my patients are on enzymes, dietary enzymes, because they need that additional support. We've just whacked their pancreas so hard that there's not a lot of digestion available. So we supplement the digestive enzymes to facilitate them to be able to break it down. Because at the end of the day, if they eat something and they can't break it down, out the poop chute it goes.
Exactly.
Or create inflammation.
Right. And it often comes out in a most undesirable form. So that's the deal, is how can we get them to digest and assimilate?
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
Dr. Siegel, this has been an absolute ball. And so go to drmarlenesiegel.com. She's got all of her courses, information there, supplement, raw diet, all those good things. And is there one last message you'd like to leave our listeners with about taking a proactive approach to their pet's health?
Yeah. Put yourself in a state of gratitude every morning, midday, and every night. Stop and think about what it is that you have to be grateful for. And it doesn't have to be big stuff. You open your eyes and you may see the sun coming through. You may hear birds chirping. You may feel good that morning. You may have, my well just went out at the house. So waking up and having water, when I tell you how grateful I am, because when you don't have it, it's miserable. So they don't have to be big things, but just what are you grateful for? Start your day with that, because energetically what that does is it changes your neurochemicals and your pets entrain to your energy. So you're going to reset them while you reset yourself. And then throughout the day, look around, be present for just a moment and observe what's happening in the world around you and be grateful that you can participate in that. Find the goodness. And then before you go to bed at night, one more review. What are you grateful for that happened that day? And maybe for you guys, it's going to be that you heard this talk. And we would appreciate that. Tell Dr. Ruth how much you adore her and appreciate her and are grateful for all the work that she does to help bring education to you, the pet parent.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Dr. Siegel, thank you so much. For all of you out there listening, we're so glad to have you here because you want different for yourself and for your pets. So stay tuned. There'll be another episode of Healing Tales coming up real soon.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Healing Tales, where pet parents become healers, one tail wag at a time. Want more tools and support? Head to drruthroberts.com. Until next time, trust your gut, question the noise, and keep showing up for your pet.